Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rock and Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rock and Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. Nobody knows a little bit of comedy and fucking with the living like the devil. And I find that it's very interesting and almost apropos that we have to have a little bit of a showdown of some laughable things, some comedic things. Ironically, the same comedic genius is involved in both of these movies as we pit up vampires, Dracula, Dead and Loving It. Well, who didn't see that coming? Against the devils, Repossessed. And to a certain degree, who didn't see that one coming either? But Devil, my friend, looks like we're going to have ourselves a Leslie Nielsen showdown today.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was looking back and thinking back, and the only time we really ever had like an actual vampire versus devil showdown would have been our funny April Fool's one we did, where we did, a vampire movie, and you picked, the littlest vampire, and I did a devil movie, which was She Devil, which had nothing to do with either she or a devil. But it was kind of funny though, because that was, our actual one where we pitted each other. That's like, well, it's just kind of funny. We both picked a comedy horror film, and we're like, when you did Dracula Dead and Loving It, I'm like, well, shit, that's a vampire movie. I might as well go with his counterpart of Repossessed, which actually, in all actuality, it would have been the other way around because Repossessed came out before Dracula Dead and Loving It. But yeah, I think it's just kind of funny that this is like, another vampire versus devil showdown, and it's off the wall. It's not normal horror, and it's comedy and mixed into it again. So it's like, ooh, yeah, we're gonna have it's gonna be a fun one. Just like I said, especially because we're both huge fans of Leslie. So I mean, he was an awesome actor. Obviously, everybody mainly knows him. I mean, people do know Dracula Dead and Loving It. People do know Repossessed, but most people who know him, out of the horror genre, know him mostly for the Naked Gun series. So I mean, which is awesome. It's kind of funny now you think about it because Naked Gun is a comedy and not a horror, but it had O.J. Simpson in it.
Yes. Ooh, so it might have been a little bit of a preempted horror in that.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, brother. And I mean, these movies are both great. They're so fun. They're campy to the like utmost extent and extreme of campy, at least as far as like movies that somewhat had a little bit of like funding behind them and stuff like that. Not a lot, nothing over the top. If anything, Dracula Dead and Loving It, with the involvement of Mel Brooks, probably had the ability to be more polished and it definitely was, in my opinion, as opposed to Repossessed, which has more of like a grainy feel to it. But I just mean it more in like with those casts that they had, especially with somebody like Leslie, as opposed to, Trauma and Full Moon, which we talk about on the regular, that you can definitely tell are like lower budgets, always lower budgets, and designed to kind of be so as well. But this one's definitely going to be a fun one, and we'll jump right into it, man. And just kick it off with Dracula Dead and Loving It, I guess. The funny thing about Dracula Dead and Loving It is this movie is much more of a actual parody, almost closer though to almost a remake of Bela Lugosi's Dracula, where it's got a little bit of that tweaks in of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but it's very, very similar to the actual Bela Lugosi Dracula, but with like some spins on the way that they're saying, as opposed to, children of the night, what music they make, as opposed to, children of the night, what a mess they make, and things like that. And it's funny because I remember you know, watching because I've seen Dracula Dead and Loving It so many times. Me and Mrs. Vamp are huge fans of that movie and watch it very often. That's one of those movies that we talk all the time about. Movies, we revisit each year, revisit maybe a couple of times a year. Mrs. Vamp and I revisit this movie often a year, often within a month or multiples of that. But when we did our Universal Monsters showdown, it really was funny as I was watching and rewatching Bella's Dracula and going like, my God, I know every part of this movie still, and I was already familiar, but it's so locked and ingrained because it was so specific and used for Dracula Dead and Loving It. But one of the things I really love about Dracula Dead and Loving It is, I mean, the cast alone is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's funny because for me, it's Mel Brooks at his absolute best, while I feel that the common populace really seemed to have Young Frankenstein as kind of his coup de grace of like horror parody movies. But for me, it's always been Dracula Dead and Loving It. I mean, you've got Leslie, you've got Amy Yazbek, you've got Peter McNichol, who I think is just a show stealer as Renfield in this movie. But it's a great movie. It's so funny. I love it dearly. And I am going to keep it in high regards, and we'll get closer to that when it's necessary. But that's the overall basis of the movie is, Renfield's character, solicitor from London, going to meet up with Dracula, being turned into Dracula's slave, and being this kind of klutz nincompoop as Dracula, basically Dracula comes to town and then looks to take over and find a bride to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's definitely the with the Mel Brooks part of it and stuff like that too. I mean I don't know. Like I said, I love this movie. I've always loved this movie. I don't know if I put it as nearly as a high regards as far as Mel Brooks movies. I mean, like I said, I mean as far as you go with horror ones, there's really, I mean, that I can think of, it's only Young Frankenstein
There's
and
two.
Dracula Dead and Loving It. And like I said, I love Dracula Dead and Loving It, but I'm a bigger young Frank, the Frankenstein guy, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, I like that. But I mean, like, to me, like, you got to think of, like, when you think of the holy of all Mel Brooks movies. I mean, it's either, to me, it's Men in Tights or
Yeah.
Spaceballs. Spaceballs is probably my favorite one of all of them. But like I said, like, definitely, you definitely have a lot of that Mel Brooks in this. And I mean, not only is he, directing the movie, he obviously plays a part in the movie. He is Van Helsing in this film. And like you said, like every time I see Renfield, my first thing to go to is Ghostbusters. It's a Vigo. But I mean, he's probably got the best role in this movie. You
So
just because it's just so stupid with him, like, eating the bugs during the one scene. And he was like, "Oh no, I'm not eating anything." He's got like a little cricket hanging out of his mouth the whole entire time. It's so blatantly stupid, and that's like the thing about I
yeah.
love this movie. It's like it's Mel Brooks, full on Mel Brooks. I mean, that's just how Mel Brooks does it, just over the top stupidness. Like, even to the point where, like, yeah, like you said, it definitely is, spoofing more of that Dracula, but it does throw a little bit of, the Bela Lugosi's Dracula, but it definitely does spoof a little bit of that, the Dracula, with Gary Oldman and stuff like that, the Bram Stoker's
Bram
one,
Stoker.
where like even like, he comes out, he's got his head looking kind of like Bram Stoker, but then you realize it's actually just a hat the whole
Fucking
entire time. He takes it off. The, like you said, the Children of the Night one. I like where he's like, "I don't drink wine." And he's like, drinks it. He's like, "Oh my God, this is good."
yeah.
He's realizing, and it's just like stupid things like that. But I mean, that's the funny thing about this movie is, if you've ever watched, like I said, if you watched the original Dracula, if you watched the Bram Stoker's Dracula, you're pretty much getting the same movie. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the one thing about this movie versus some of his other movies, is his other movies are more. I mean, Robin Hood's not really that much of an original idea, but that movie is
Yeah.
still very original. It's not really like almost shot for shot for the Robin Hood movies, where
Yeah.
this is more of like a almost a shot for shot kind of stuff for the original Dracula. Obviously, with the extra stupidness and quirkiness and dumb things, but still, you know what I mean. It's got him coming to the castle, the people in the towns not wanting him to go see the castle because that's the bad area. You have all that. Do you have Nosferatu? Oh yes, we've got Nosferatu. Even in there, a little bit of spoof of Nosferatu even in this thing. And then, like I said, you got, the trip and the Demeter with, him bouncing around the whole entire
The
time from side to
coffin.
side in the coffin and shit like that. So it's just so great, I mean, you got the main players like, the girlfriend Nina, and then the other girl, I can't remember her name right now off
Lucy.
Lucy, yeah, yeah, you have her like in the Dracula film. So it's like I said, I mean it's a fun movie, and it's fun going into it just because it's like you kind of know what you're expecting, especially when if you've not seen this movie or not seen this movie in a long time, but you've watched those other Dracula movies. Then you're like, oh my God, yeah, it's gonna get ready to come up. Things that are gonna come, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they just went to the stupid tenths of a imagination of like how to do it. But it's just so funny to because it's like it's taking the movie's so comical, but it's kind of taking itself seriously too, like the whole entire time too, where it's just like yeah, I mean it's. Like I said, it's just a fun movie. It's fun to see Leslie. It's crazy though that to see that these movies came out, like I said, we've lost Leslie, within the few years, but I just remember him being just old, even when we were younger watching these movies, and then just
Oh my
being still old, and even in these.
dude, even when I was watching Repossessed, which I watched after Dracula Loving Dead and Loving It, just because that's how it worked out when I was watching the movies for a review, is me and Mrs. Vamp watched Dracula Dead and Loving It, and then, a few days back when she was painting, I was like, I'm gonna get caught up on this movie. I need to review and refresh. And considering that Repossessed, just like you said, actually comes out before Dracula Dead and Loving It, it was funny because when I looked at Leslie, my initial reaction, and don't get me wrong, it's not a huge gap between the two movies. It's like 2 years or 3 years. But when I still saw Leslie, I was like, Jesus Christ, didn't that fucker ever have color in his hair? Like ever? And it's funny because like he was in his 60s when he did Dracula and Repossessed. Like he was a senior citizen at the
Yeah.
time that he did these movies. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, when it comes to like Dracula Dead and Loving It, like there's not a ton of just crazy back and forth banter that I can really get into when it comes to this movie because just like what you and I have discussed, like it's like it's not shot for shot, but it's pretty damn close to Bela Lugosi's Dracula. But the one thing I love so much about this movie that I do think has does have a small leg up when it comes to Repossessed is the fact that this movie, and I chalk this up to Mel, is just one liner driven. There's so many great one liners or like moments in scenes that you can just remember or joke about with like your best friend or like your loved one where you just joke. Like me and Mrs. Vamp all the time will joke about it's like she'll like ask me like why I'm not doing something or what I'm doing, and I'll be like, I'm sorry, babe, I'm British, and she'll be like, but so are these, and
Mhm.
like the scene with Renfield being seduced by the brides of Dracula, like they're writhing on it and trying to seduce him, and at first he's just like, my God, what are you doing to the furniture? And then they're rubbing on him, and he's like, no, this is wrong, but then gives into it. Wrong me, wrong my brains out. And then probably ultimately my favorite of like the one-liners, which I wanted to keep to three, so I'm not just quoting the whole movie, is the is the is the stake to the heart scene on Lucy with all the blood, where like he Harker goes to stake her, and you know Mel Brooks, Van Helsing is like, wait, and he gets out of the way, and he like stakes her, and it's this explosion of blood, and he's just like, oh my god, there's so much blood. And then he's like, and he's like, oh my god, but she's still alive. And he's like, hit her again. And he's like, no, how much blood can she have left? And you see him lightly tap, and even more blood than the first time comes out. She's almost dead. She's dead enough, and just chucks the fucking mallet as he's just walking back to the castle, just drenched in blood. When you've got Dr. Seward going like, what the fuck did you guys get into? But anyway, I love that movie so much also because again, it's a vampire movie. It's close to my heart with it being a overall Bela Lugosi reference with, you know, nods to Bram Stoker, but the one-liners in typical Mel Gibson fashion, no different than Robin Hood Men in Tights, Spaceballs, all that stuff is just you remember those lines. They're just so great.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's funny too. Even kind of going back to to Leslie Nielsen being old. It's kind of like that whole like it's like, oh my God, does this guy have any color? It kind of reminds me of like Steve Martin. I remember Steve Martin with gray hair since I was
Yes,
a kid,
you're
and
right.
it's like he's still got gray hair now. It's like, did this guy ever have any color in his hair? Like Jesus, man, his he was gray in the 80s.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And like I said, yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, that's the one thing, ultimately this movie has a little bit more than Repossessed as far as when we get into that, is
Yeah.
it definitely, it definitely has that Mel Brooks, touch to it where, yeah, it's got all those great one-liners. It's got, it definitely has that Mel Brooks more big of a budget, and things like that. Because obviously it's a Mel Brooks movie. They're gonna people producers and film places are going to be like, well, hell yeah, we're going to throw money into a Mel Brooks movie. So I mean, that's the main benefit I think that you get for the most part, as far as going into to Dracula Dead and Loving It. But yeah, it's just one of those ones, like you said, it's one of those movies that, like, if it's on, you can just watch it over and over again, where, like I said, I mean, like, no disrespect to Bela Lugosi's Dracula, because we both
Yeah.
love it, but it is a very, older time film. It's definitely a very, you have to be kind of in the mood to sort of watch it and things like that. Where this movie, you can just, hey, I want to watch a stupid Dracula movie. Okay, let's just throw this in. It's one of those ones where it's like, when you think of like comic, I put it in, in probably like the top five maybe of like the comic vampire movies. It's one of those ones, like I said, you can just watch over and over and over again with like that. Like Once Bitten, with Jim Carrey's one you can
Very.
just watch all over again. And then, then you can take it and say, hey, it doesn't always work out, because I mean, we've talked about it before, but like, comic-y funny, supposed to be funny vampire movie, but Vampire in Brooklyn that didn't do nearly as good. So it's like,
Ugh.
just because you got vampires in comedy, doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to work out. But like I said, when it comes to Mel Brooks movies, I mean, I think he pretty much, you go through his lineup, there's even the ones that you might not say you don't like nearly as much, or maybe you not don't like these ones as much, they're still bangers. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
Mel Brooks movies are definitely gonna go. And I forgot, I mean, I remember Mel Brooks being in the movie because I remember the Van Helsing part, but I completely forgot that it was actually a Mel Brooks directed film. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's one of those ones where, like I said, it's like, it's not intentionally that you're, not thinking of Dracula Dead and Love It, but like I said, when you have movies like, Young Frankenstein, Men in Tights, Spaceballs, and all these other big, huge Mel Gibson, I almost said Mel Gibson, like you said earlier, Mel Brooks
Oh,
guys,
yeah.
Mel Brooks guys movies,
It just happens.
yeah, yeah, it's like, damn that Mel, damn that Passion of the Christ guy, boo. But anyway, like I said, when it comes to those are the kind of movies that you always think of. Those are the, when if someone says Mel Brooks, there's like, there's those ones, even Blazing Saddles and
Yep.
things like that. Dracula Dead and Loving It is not, like I said, I'm not saying it's one of his, it's not his worst movie. It's not his best. It's just one of those ones that people don't really relate towards as much. If you say, hey, you like Mel Brooks movie, you don't get too many people that go, "Oh, Dracula Dead and Eleven is my favorite Mel Brooks movie," other than maybe like the vampire yourself, probably. But that I mean that's just on cliche. So I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, like I said, I could say that Repossessed is probably one of my Leslie Nielsen favorite films, and I mean that goes on cliche for the devil. So
No, absolutely. And it's cool too because, Mel's longtime, wife, Anne Bancroft was in the movie as well as like the lady selling Renfield a cross to protect him. And where at first it's like, no, take this cross for protection, just to flip it on and be like, yeah, but you still got to pay for that shit. So
yeah.
like, but no, it's great. Like the movie's just it's so fun. Again, yeah, Mel Brooks, it allows for a bigger budget, hence the polish and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's so many great Mel Brooks movies. Just like you said, Spaceball is absolutely elite. We both love Robin Hood Men in Tights, Blazing Saddles. It's definitely a Mel Brooks movie. And then, of course, Mel Brooks being Mel Brooks, he's always got to tie, his classic heritage that he, is always so passionate about in there, Fushta, when it comes to all that, all the way down to the ultimate like death scene of Dracula, where it's like you're trying to have like the big climactic finish, and then Renfield and all of his stupidity glory was simply trying to like rescue Leslie Nielsen and get him out of harm's way when all he did was open up a sunroof and have him burned by the sun and stuff like that. But gotta love that final like Renfield, you asshole, as he's falling down and turning to ashes. But I mean, it's a great movie. It's fun. Exactly. It's right up there with campy, fun comedy vampire movies. Just like you said, Once Bitten. I'll even throw Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage in there. While that movie it's kind of designed to be a little bit more honestly dramatic to it, where it's a little bit more of that dramedy, but it has that comedy aspect because the stuff that Nicholas does in that movie is so ridiculous and over the top with when his obsession kicks in. But Devil, my friend, when it comes to like getting into the obituaries, honestly, I'll keep this short and sweet. Like I ultimately give this movie an 8, while my love of this movie is on a sheer level of just 9. Like, I love this movie, and that's a completely just, I personally love this movie. It's a vampire movie, so of course I'm going to like it, but everything about this movie I love. The fact that me and Mrs. Vamp really bond over this movie as well is one of the reasons why, nothing more than me personally, I give this movie a 9. But when it comes to just overall enjoyment for the horror populace, you know, just laughing, killer cast. And that's one of the reasons I do give it a bit of a higher rating is the cast alone is just top to bottom, very, very skilled, very talented, all the way from just the main players, Dr. Seward, Lucy, Mina, Harker, Mel, and, Leslie, of course, just the main particular, and Peter, the main power players. It's an incredibly gifted and talented cast. So I do think that comes into play a little bit. But I do like the movie overall as an 8. I just think it's a great time, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely got to agree with you on that. I mean, like I said, I mean, in the scale, like I said, in the scale of Mel Brooks movies, like I said, I put it over that little bit of over that average and stuff like that. Because, like I said, I mean, not that I don't like this movie, not that I don't love this movie and have fun with this movie, but I've always gone more, lean towards more some of the other Mel Brooks movies and stuff like that. Like I said, even forgetting that this was a Mel Brooks movie to begin with, I'm like, oh shit, it is a Mel Brooks movie. Oh my god! I remember him being in it, but I didn't realize that it was an actually a Mel Brooks movie. So I mean, so for me, like I said, I mean, I definitely wouldn't. I don't think I could go as high as an 8 for me personally. Even though
Sure.
personally I like this movie, I think it's a fun movie and it's a good movie. But like I mean, in the scale of like Mel Brooks movies and stuff like that, if I would go to give an 8, it'd be kind of hard to gauge the other ones that are way above it. They would have to go over a 10
Right.
because of where they're at. So I mean for me
That's fair.
I'd have to go with a 7.0 on the scale for that. But like I said, I mean that like I said, I still love the movie. Like I said, it's
Yeah.
still fun. Like I said, it does falter where I think we're in the this movie versus Repossessed, which is like it's definitely a comedy, but it's a more of its own story and stuff
A
like that.
little
Where
more
this is,
original.
yeah, this is just basically just a comedic spoof on
Yeah.
that. But even like taking like Young Frankenstein, obviously it's a spoof of Frankenstein, but it doesn't follow the Frankenstein story almost to a T like Dracula Dead and Loving. It follows more of that Bram Stoker, that Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and follows that story a little bit closer to the source material. So I think that's why I would give it a 7. But like I said, overall, I still think it's an awesome, fun movie.
No, definitely, man. Absolutely. Devil, are we cool with meeting in the middle as we
Yep.
tend to do at a 7.5? You down for that?
Yep.
All right, man.
7.5 sounds good.
Sounds good. Absolutely. So that's the way it's going to be for Vampire and Devil for Dracula Dead and Loving It at a 7.5 on the obituaries. But we can't just let the vampire have all the fun. We have devilish things to discuss as well. And like we said, let's keep it rolling with Leslie Nielsen. But of course, Linda Blair reprising her role without reprising her role, which is kind of cool because it's basically to a certain degree almost as if Reagan was grown up and got caught back up, in what made her famous to a certain degree, although she's also playing a different character name. Devil, my good friend, Repossessed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I love this movie, because not only, like I said, not only do you have it's a spoof, sort of a sequel to The Exorcist. Obviously, in the very beginning of the movie, they play it as like we're The Exorcist, and you see the scenes, and it does what it does, and he does it, and she gets better and stuff like that. But obviously, and they could spoof it a little bit, but they didn't want to go hardcore probably into it, maybe the rights and stuff like that. So obviously they changed their name from Reagan to Nancy, which is funny because Nancy Reagan. So I thought that was already fun to begin with. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it's like you get this basically almost like you said, it's almost a continuation. It's like a part two of Exorcist. Like what would happen if when she gets not with the devil, and she's a going lever like that, and then what happens if the devil possesses her again? And like I said, yeah, I mean, how many movies where you get to, like, when it comes to these kind of things where you get spoofs, you get the original actress that was in the original Exorcist, which
Yeah.
with Linda Blair, and then Linda Blair loving it, because I know, like, to begin with she was kind of like on the fence of not wanting, I don't know if I should do it, but then like getting into that role and being able to spoof it and seeing how stupidly comedic it was, and basically kind of making fun of all that. She said, because like when she was making that movie, there was so much stuff that she had to go through, torturous, from like, from her having to going through, all the makeup and doing all this stuff, and just like the whole film, it was a very hard film for her as far as filmmaking, where she said this movie was like the complete opposite, because it was just so lighthearted and funny and over the top stupid that she enjoyed herself. And what I mean, she's an adult, like I said, now in this movie, she's obviously an adult now and stuff like that. So, I mean, like I said, I mean, Linda Blair, looking good in this movie. And yeah, I mean, that's where it's where I love Dracula Dead and Loving It. When it comes to the devil, like I said, man, skin wins. And that's the one thing about Dracula Dead and Loving It. Not Mel Brooks movies in general, but Dracula Dead and Loving It has a little bit of sexual innuendo, and you get some nice cleavage when you were talking about the vampire girls getting on,
Wrong
trying to
me,
go after
wrong me.
it. But other than that, you really don't get nudity. Where at least in Repossessed, you get nudity. You get to see Not only do you get to see a nice pair of boobs in class, you also get to see a naked Julie Strain, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that heavy metal queen, in her debut back there and stuff like that. And getting into it later on when we get into more of that stuff like that. But that's why I love this movie, because it's got that, like I said, it's that spoofer, it's her growing up, and all of a sudden she's watching TV, and then what in the whole but behold does it? You got Ned Beatty playing the freaking pastor, like televangelist guy, which is just awesome, and his freaking wife and her multitude of dogs, where they, hey, say hi to Foo, hey Foo.
It's like when we talked about Trick or Treat on the M3 edition, the fact that you've got Ozzy Osbourne playing like, an anti-heavy metal like pastor, It's kind of like that same kind of thing where it's just like, this is kind of an absurd role for you of all people to play. While it works, it's still just kind of bizarre. But yeah, man, I mean, the movie's definitely fun. It's definitely a good time. Again, it definitely lacks a little bit in the budget, but that's understandable versus its counterpart and the track record that Mel already had. But they do so much too that's so much fun, and I love the ongoing use of split pea soup. Like, it's not just the one reference where obviously anybody who's familiar with like just the trivia of The Exorcist knows that split pea soup is what was used as the vomit coming out of Reagan. But not only is it like used again, it's like featured almost kind of commercial style, like, here, have some of this, tasty wonderful soup. And also the fact that like it's almost even used kind of like a weapon as well, which was then ultimately used about, you know, 15 years later when, Scary Movie was spoofing things like that. And then they're also using, the whole Exorcist vomit thing almost as like, people dueling it out, like, like Showdown at the OK Corral style. But I always thought it was super funny. I mean, I remember one time at a horror convention, I'm sure this has happened a million times, but when I was in line to meet Linda Blair, there were people with cans of like green pea soup and split pea soup for her to autograph and stuff like that, which I always thought was kind of hilarious. But it's definitely a fun one. Yeah, that whole like modern day housewife who thinks she has her shit together and does have her shit together, and she's just doing modern day housewife things, but then gets possessed by the television, repossessed television, almost poltergeist style. And then again, she's like on the bed flailing around like she really did back for the Exorcist movie, which ended up injuring her, in real life. But then it's kind of like, that comedy aspect as well, where it's like, babe, can you stop bouncing on the bed? Like, can you just like stop? And she just kind of does. But then that same, it reminded me so much of Late Night with the Devil, especially obviously when it got to the talk show part of it, where you have her tied to the bed and being shown to the masses, but it's just that comedy, original idea that then Late Night with the Devil did a more realistic version of, like
Yeah, yeah.
more dramatic style.
Yeah, yeah, you got a little bit. Like I said, just the things that go into the movie too, like when she's doing it, like you said, she's the housewife, she's making food, like, oh, I made your guys' favor with this and that and splits pea soup, and they're like, oh God, no, the kids and the other guy's like, oh yeah, well, I told you the kids were they weren't that good, they haven't gotten their acting chops yet. That's what's cool about this movie too. It's a lot of breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience and talking to the theater goers and stuff like that. Because even when Linda Blair's in her exorcist mode, she's like, and that person in the back right there that's talking in the theater won't shut up during the movie.
Yeah.
Things like that. But I mean, it's like you got Father May I the whole entire time, so you got all the jokes with that. I
Yeah.
mean, even like him to begin with, like when this movie was done, Leslie Nielsen was like, I don't think there was enough farts in this movie. So they even started it off when they're doing the very beginning of the intro of the movie. There's a big, dun dun dun, and there's a big fart rate in the beginning and stuff like that. So it's like it's great. And then what else could make this movie any better? I mean you got the priests going against the devil, and who else should commentate it but Mean Gene Okerlund
Yep.
and
And
Jesse
just to
the
the body.
Body. I'm like, oh great, man. You got some old school wrestling. He's like, it's a cheap move from the devil. You gotta love like just the WWF
Yep.
commentating in this thrown into it when you're really not expecting it. But like I said, yeah, this movie is just like when it comes to like off the wall stupid shit. This
Yeah.
movie is just the absurdity of stupid shit. I mean, not only is it spoofing this, it's spoofing that. I mean, there's even songs like the chasing the devil is obviously a spoof of Devil Inside from NXX.
Yep.
The whole entire time. So not only are they spoofing like, movies and stuff, they're spoofing like songs and rock and roll and stuff like that. They got the devil in the blue dress song when they're
Yep.
singing it, and she hates, and then that's the cliche that's the one thing that can kill the devil is the devil hates rock and roll music, which makes it even funnier because everybody talks about how that, the rock and roll is the devil's music. Well, apparently the devil does not like rock and roll.
Yeah. So it's so again, it's so absurd. But the movie is great, like because it's a really cool idea and directions to go and play off of, where it's got that more original concept, but that plays off the references that it needs to and what got it basically brings it to the dance. But yeah, it's so funny, and having Linda Blair playing a character now known as Nancy, coming off a character known as Reagan, and having Nancy Reagan be like a pop culture figure, I thought was kind of hilarious too if you put them next to each other. So it's definitely a fun one for sure, man. But when it comes to the obituaries, how do you see this one stack up, brother, as we put together our final rankings and then compare them for the fatality?
Yeah, yeah. So when it comes to the ranking, to me, like I said, I put this like in the high regards when it comes to kind of like how you did with Dracula Dead and Loving It. You know what I mean? I mean, not only is like when you think of horror spoofs, you know what I mean? It was, especially like I said, like how the Naked Gun was doing that, or like how Hot Shots was doing these kind of things. Repossessed was sort of the scary movie before scary movie was, a
Totally.
thing. So, it's that, that predecessor of like doing stuff like that. And like I said, it's nice to, you get the original actress like Linda Blair in this movie. This was during the time of the 90s when Linda Blair was smoking hot. She looks so good in this movie.
Yeah, that she
it's
did.
it's like man, she like, not that Linda Blair doesn't still look amazing now, but the way she looked in the 90s with just that curly hair that she had and all that, I was like, oof, you know, chef's kiss on that one. Like I said, plus you, like I said, in this movie you get nudity, so skin, like I said, the sin in the skin is always good. But like I said, I mean, it's just one of those ones where, unlike, like I said, unlike, where you had Dracula Dead and Loving It, it had a little bit of that more polishedness, and the fact that it was directed by Mel Brooks. Almost said Mel Gibson again. Goddamn Mel Gibson. It was by Mel
That dude's
Brooks.
gonna have to cut us a royalty check
Yeah,
for this coverage.
where this one is directed by the guy who made Meatballs 4. So I mean, right there just tells you, you're talking about apples and oranges over here. So I mean, so you gotta throw away all that. Of course, Mel Brooks movie's gonna look and they're gonna have a lot bigger actors in it. It's gonna have a lot more, polishedness. It's gonna have a lot more liquiper one-liners. But I mean, I don't know, man. Repossessed has a lot of good puns, a lot of good
Was.
one-liners in that movie. Oh my God, it's funny as hell. But yeah, so I mean, you have that and stuff like, you can add all that kind of stuff into it. So for me, I like I said, like you, I have to give this an 8.0 for me, just because, like I said, I mean, like I said, not saying that Dracula Dead and Loving It's not a fun movie and a good movie, but then again, it's the for me the little extra bonus points for
Yeah.
this is because it's an original film. It's basically almost a sequel sort of to an Exorcist, where Dracula Dead and Loving It was basically just a comic version of the same movie.
Yeah. No, you're definitely right about that, and I definitely hear you completely. As far as the way, so we're going to end up having a mini extension on this because it's basically going to be our same scores flipped. So I see this movie as a 7, so it's definitely going to land at a 7.5 for Repossessed. When it comes to the movie, just for me personally, it's so fun and I love the quips. You're right. It's got some great little like quips and references and one-liners to it that definitely comes without saying. Linda looks amazing. Leslie's hilarious. And again, Ned just being Ned is super bizarre in that role, but so incredibly fun. It just didn't quite resonate with me as stronger as Dracula Dead and Loving It. And this really isn't about me resonating more with a vampire movie. Again, it just has a little bit more with that Mel Gibbs, Jesus Christ, that Mel Brooks style. Um, Again, I have so much more familiarity also with his movies and his overall style that that movie had a lot of like ways to grip me because there's so much stuff in Dracula Dead and Loving It that reminded me of Robin Hood Men in Tights, remind me of things like Spaceballs and things like that. So with the movie Repossessed, again, being a 7.5, right there neck and neck with Dracula Dead and Loving It. My only real statement as far as why I think ultimately Dracula gets the nudge, and it's definitely not a fault, and it's almost to a certain degree unfair, but I just feel that polish, a little bit more of that staying power. But overall, the cast, I just think is a little bit more solid top to bottom. But that also has to do with the fact that you had this established cast really kind of coming at it from all angles, where it was a lot trickier and also more difficult, again, when you put Mel Brooks up against Meatballs 4 and the way that it's looked at there. I do also personally think that the one-liners and the points to be remembered are a little bit stronger in Dracula Dead and Loving It. While again, you've got the nudity, you've got the devil's sin and skin, which is absolutely awesome and very, very memorable. I just feel I feel like when I hear people talk about movies or parodies or comedy horror, I do think that Dracula Dead and Loving It does just hit the common horror populist spectrum a little stronger because I'll hear references to Wrong Me. What are you doing to the furniture? And my God, there's so much blood. I just think there's a little bit more familiarity with Dracula Dead and Loving It that Repossessed just didn't quite get, which again is no fault of their own. I just think it's the way the cards were dealt with that situation and that ability to be great versus having to fight a little harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, at least for as far as my points for giving my movie Repossessed a little bit of a budge.
Of
Like I
course.
said, the main two things would be one, you have an original cast member, not that was no fault in their own that
Yep.
all the people who in Dracula, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, were pretty much dead by the time
The
Dracula
movie
Dead in Love came out. So I mean,
60, the movie came out 60 years earlier.
so I'm not faulting him in that, but you have
You're not,
that you
but
have
you're not wrong in this point. You're definitely not wrong with this
the,
point.
the fact that you have an original film. This is an original Repossessed as an original movie. It's originally the story and all that stuff is all original. Where Dracula and Dead and Eleven are playing off of a script and a storyline that's already based and known. And the fact that, like I said, when it comes to the Mel Brooks stuff, well, yeah, I mean, of course, most people are gonna know Dracula Dead and Loving It more because of Mel Brooks, because
Right.
of the fact that it's a Mel Brooks movie and it's a big movie and most people have probably seen that. But like I said, as like for 2 points when it comes to the Mel Brooks things, one, like I said, if you ask anybody their top five Mel Brooks movies, Dracula Dead and Loving It may be on that list, but it's probably going to be number five
Right.
if it's on the list. Where, like I said, yeah, the guy directed Repossessed. The only good thing on his whole entire resume was Meatballs 4, and that's not even that great. So,
Right.
but yeah, so that. But the other thing with the other thing with Mel Brooks, if you took Mel Brooks away from that movie, let's say somebody else let's say the Meatballs 4 guy directed Dracula Dead and Loving It, I think you would have a completely different movie because the fact that you don't have that Mel Brooks, because the fact that it's got that Mel Brooks money, it's got that Mel Brooks studio. Of course, Mel Brooks can bring everybody who's cast wise. Not you got to realize, man, taking that movie, take out the people that have been in Mel Brooks movies out of that movie.
Right.
Then you'd really only have a couple people. I mean, you would obviously have Leslie Nielsen because he's never been in one, but he's a spoof master. And
Yeah,
then
but you lose Amy.
Yeah, I mean you have Renfield in there. I mean he hasn't been in any ones, but a lot of those like cameo people that come out and stuff like that, like the guy that's dragging Renfield in and out of the thing. He's a typical. He's the guy. He's the guy that plays Igor in Young Frankenstein. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So he's got like throughout this whole entire movie a lot of his normal cast members, and like you said with the polishedness and things like that, obviously yes, yeah. I mean I can't really tell right now, but I can guarantee you that Dracula Dead and Love It had at least a 10 times bigger budget than Repossessed probably
Oh,
had.
I'm
So
sure without a
so
doubt.
so obviously that one. So but I mean like I said, when it comes to Dracula Dead and Love It, like you said, most people are gonna know that one. Most people are gonna tell, do the jokes and do the one-liners and do and stuff like that. But I mean, I think, with that, with just because the fact that it's a little, Repossessed is one of those ones where it's kind of like a hidden gem. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't really know about it as much, and that might be a good thing. Maybe because a lot of people, but maybe people will, when they watch this and stuff like that, be like, oh, maybe I haven't seen Repossessed. What? There's a movie with Linda Blair reprising her Exorcist role. What the hell? There's titties in this movie? Hell yeah! So like I said, I mean, I think that's my main reason of why I think Repossessed is just like I said. Not saying that Repossessed is a better movie overall. Dracula
Right.
Dead and Love It's definitely got that better. More people are gonna know what it is. The movie
Right.
overall is better, but like I said, in general, like I said, it's just the fact that you've got two things that are going for you automatically before you get to Repossessed movie.
Yeah.
You've got Mel Brooks and you got a story that already has a following, which is
Right.
the Bela Lugosi's Dracula. So I mean, of course, that one's gonna be like I said. People know Young Frankenstein. They're like, oh, he's making a vampire movie. This is gonna be hilarious. I'm gonna watch it. Where, like I said, if Mel Brooks would have made Repossessed, then maybe things
Yeah.
like that could have been a little bit different. But that's the only reason why I say just the like I said. I even though I think Dracula Dead and Living it probably overall is probably the more fun movie because Repossessed is fun, but it's weird and kooky. It just gets off the
Yeah.
wall stupid. Where it's over the wall, over the top stupid. Where Mel the Dracula Dead and Loving it's definitely Mel Brooks stupid. It's in
Yeah.
that lane of Mel Brooks. It's Mel Brooks's comedy. It's the same style that he does for all of his movies, where he has a certain type of comedy that he likes that he
Yeah.
uses and stuff like that. So that's the only reason why I say repossessed, only because of the fact that, like I said, I mean, the Linda Blair adding into it, but I just think of just the originality. You know what I mean? It just took, just the fact that somebody made a spoof where it's a sequel to a movie where. Yeah, I mean, there is an Exorcist 2, there's an Exorcist 3, and there's an Exorcist 4, but this is basically just going, okay, let's just pretend like all those other Exorcist movies don't count, and this one
No.
goes.
Oh, for sure. No, Devil, I love all your points, and I think they're incredibly valid. I got one more point to kind of put at you, almost kind of Dead Snow style, like when you and I were talking about that. If we just take ourselves kind of out of the equation, we take like fandom kind of out of the equation. If we just have like horror fans that we just and show them Dracula Dead and Loving It, and show them Repossessed, which movie just in general do you think they enjoy more
Well,
and revisit?
yeah. But then
I
again, but then again, that leans towards the Mel Brooks thing of it. That's why,
that's the tricky part too.
and
Where
that's the
I'm
problem
trying
is
not to
because
think of it as Mel Brooks fans. I'm just trying to think of if we just take horror fans
yeah.
and show them Dracula Dead and Loving It, and we just sit in the back and say nothing, and show Repossessed, and then just ask them which movie they just if they enjoyed one more than the other. That's my only like tricky thing here. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah, because
like
it's kind of weird because I think people
yeah,
are going to enjoy Dracula and Dead and loving it more, but people are going to enjoy Repossessed more too because since it's an original idea. They're like, "Oh, this is just a comedy remake of Dracula." Like, they're going to be like, "Ugh." I mean,
you're,
granted like I said, I mean, so yeah, it's kind of I don't know. I think we might have to fucking
I was gonna
call this.
say, I was gonna say, Devil. I mean, it
You
can
might
have
just call this
it.
a Leslie Nielsen draw.
We really might have to, and I think that might be the way to do this. With you remember, it's kind of like our better sequels where it was like friendly fatality, where Devil's Rejects won, but there wouldn't be a Devil's Rejects without Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So maybe that's just the best way to put this one is that it's a draw at 7.5 and due to and we love Leslie Nielsen. So with our with hearts and fingers pointed to the sky, maybe we just call this our first ever draw, but just a Leslie Nielsen draw.
Yeah, yeah. Cause that's I said it's a tough one to figure out because like I said, the main thing is this because most people are going to, like I said, even if they've never seen a Mel Brooks movie ever, never even if they've ever seen Dracula ever, which would be kind of really hard to find an
Right.
audience of people who've never seen, Bela Lugosi's Dracula and or a Mel Brooks movie. I think people are just gonna would enjoy because the comedy of Mel Brooks is that universal comedy where Repossessed is definitely a different style of comedy. It's definitely more slapstick stupid, where Mel Brooks is more of that just funny one-liner like stand-up comedy kind of comedy versus versus this. So yeah, it's because like I said, yeah, it's always it's gonna be a tough one just because like I said, it's not even for like us personally and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I just meant like it's just in general. Like, of course, most people, like I said, you could probably ask people who would do it and who would not and stuff like that. But the one thing that I could say maybe that might draw a little bit different is though if you go and say you went and meet let's say you go and meet Amy Yazbek at a convention, right?
Hmm.
And Linda Blair is there. I think Linda Blair would be more excited about signing Repossessed than Amy would be Dracula Dead and Loving It because Amy probably gets used to probably people signing that. I'm not saying that Linda Blair doesn't sign any Repossessed stuff, but I
Right.
would think that she would get a little more excitement because it's like, holy shit, somebody knows this movie.
No, you're definitely got a good point when it comes to that though too. Um, but even with Amy as well, there
Everybody's gonna want Men in Tights.
there are those other ones. You're going to get those men in tights. You're going to get those people with problem child,
Yeah.
and problem child too for that matter. So there's definitely some back and forth
But
on
I
that.
mean, but I'm just saying. I mean, if you could have chose anybody in that
Oh
movie.
yeah.
I mean, you can,
If I
like I
got
said,
another chance at Linda Blair, that's definitely what I would have her sign. The first time I ever met her, I got one of her 8x10s, for her to sign for the actual Exorcist. But no, I would absolutely bring Repossessed for
yeah,
Linda
because
Blair
that,
to
because yeah,
sign.
because I personally haven't met Linda Blair yet, and that's always been my thing. As much as I love The Exorcist, I would have her sign my Repossessed DVD just because I think it would be funnier. Be like, okay, you're signing all these Exorcist ones. Here's the one where you're spoofing it because you might even get you get that little bit of a giggle. Like I said,
Yeah.
not saying that she hasn't signed any of those. I'm sure she probably has, but I would guarantee you that it's probably like out of 99.9 things that's Exorcist and or other movies that she's done versus Repossessed.
No, 100% for sure. But Devil, my friend, yeah, I mean, we can go back and forth like all day on this one. So, Leslie, this one's for you, and this is going to be our first ever, just vampire and devil, the, unstoppable force meets the immovable object, and that's just the way we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it as Dracula Dead and Loving It at a 7.5, Repossessed at a 7.5. Vampire loves his Dracula, Devil loves his Repossessed, but we're going to respectfully call this one a draw. Love to the late great Leslie Nielsen, and we're just going to keep his memory alive. But Fangs and Infernos, please put in the comments of this episode and let us know what you like out of this movie. Did we get it right? Did one of us get it wrong? Is it Repossessed? Is it Dracula Dead and Loving It? We want to know which movie you guys fancy. We would love to hear all of your opinions. Again, as always, shout outs and so much love to our partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. You know, get your tea on with Brutalities, get your creepy decor on with Twisted Vine. Make sure you guys are checking out the Buffalo Bill House. It's now a bed and breakfast up in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. It's an amazing good time. Myself, Devil, Mrs. Vamp, Mrs. Devil, we all went and had an absolutely amazing time. We love Chris for everything that he's doing. And make sure that you're getting all of your exclusive Vampire and Devil podcast merchandise through rockandhorror.com. It's the only place that you can get it. We really appreciate Mark and Lizzie for all of their efforts. So that's the way it's going to be. One of our best, if not best, debates that we've ever had in our second season now of the podcast. Thank you as always, Fangs and Infernos. We love you guys. Horns up. Fangs out. Devil, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. You know it gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Slayer, oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up, fangs out. Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the Brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
Hey, It's your boy the Devil, and we're here to talk about those 90s horror comedies you love so much. Let's continue on with a little more Tales from the Crypt, this time with 1996 Bordello of Blood. Oh yeah, did you love this movie? Oh yeah, what's not to love? You got Corey Feldman, you've got lots and lots of boobs. There's so much boobs in this movie that they couldn't fit more boobs. Well, maybe they could. Anyway, it's a fun movie. You got, that comedian guy that likes to say woohoo and do lots of stuff. But anyway, the movie was, maybe not as good as Demon Knight, but Bordello Blood has its little bit of charm, and like I said, it's got lots of nudity. Oh yeah, the nudity. Oh yes, you gotta check it out. It's another one of those funny, kooky movies of the 90s. And yes, like I said, it's a Tales from the Crypt. So what's not to love about the Crypt Keeper? Check it out, Bordello of Blood. And I give it 3 thumbs up if you know what I mean.
Vampire and Devil podcast, we salute you, motherfuckers. Happy 4th of July there, Fangs and Infernos, as we get a little bit patriotic on this episode of the V&DP, and we're going to have a little bit of fun. Now, I will tell you, Devil there, my beloved, is we don't have a very good reputation right now for werewolf movies, but I think we're going to have a little bit of fun with this one, man, and I think we're going to do a cool little showdown here as we celebrate the 4th of July with Stephen King's Silver Bullet up against Uncle Sam.
Oh yeah, it's time to light the fires and hit the tires and shoot some fireworks into some werewolf's eyes, and then maybe get a little patriotic and blow some shit up while we're at it. You know what I mean? And it's kind of funny. We're talking about when you go and you look at 4th of July horror. One of the big staples like we have. Obviously we're doing Silver Bullet versus Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam is definitely 100% a 4th of July movie. There's no really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Where in technicality, Silver Bullet's not really much of a 4th of July movie. It kind of just skips through because it goes from the summer right into that kind of stuff. But, everybody kind of always assumes it as being a 4th of July movie because you always remember, the fireworks scene and things like that. But that's just,
Yeah.
it's funny, like I said. So when we get into it, it's going to be kind of fun. But, like I said, who doesn't like to, you know, make a, make a preacher one eye Willie?
Absolutely, man. No, for sure. And it's an interesting one. So yeah, criteria wise, yeah, victory to the vampire for actually having a 4th of July movie. But that's not really what we're about fully when it comes to these showdowns because Silver Bullet does fit in there. It's just Uncle Sam, obviously, it's so in your face that it's 100% a 4th of July movie. But it's all good, dude. But 1985 Silver Bullet with Gary Busey. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
we love our Gary Busey, but no, it's a fun movie, dude. Like I said, it's a Stephen King movie. It's a cool werewolf interpretation. It's got some cool kills. There's some other weird parts about the movie that aren't exactly like my favorite thing. It's not so much about the movie itself, but just kind of the way they did little things. But overall, it's a pretty like cool concept of a werewolf movie because the one thing I always thought was actually very cool about this movie was the way they kind of designed who the werewolf was, where you do tend to kind of know who the villain or whoever is, or the misunderstood cursed person or whatever. You always kind of tend to have a pretty good idea of who that is. This movie I always thought actually had a pretty cool way of kind of hitting you with that twist at the end, but it starts off, with a good old fashioned, a good old fashioned early beheading. And I mean, who doesn't love that?
Yeah, yeah, that's and who doesn't love this? Like you said, you got Gary Busey in here, crazy Gary Busey. Like I said, who knows whether or not he was super crazy like he is nowadays? But anyway, I mean, it's got one of my favorite things. I mean, there's a couple main things about Silver Bullet that's always stuck with me
Yeah.
throughout the years, but definitely one of them is the joke that he tells him, about, "Hey jackass, give me another beer." Hey, jackass, give me another beer. Why do you keep calling him jackass? Huh? He always calls me that. And I was like, that joke is always stuck in my mind all the time. Whenever I think of Gary Busey, throughout all the movies he's done throughout his career, that's the main thing I always think of is that he always calls me that.
But dude, there's some kooky things though about this movie that you just can't help but not ignore when it comes to like pop culture and stuff like that. Like if you look, if anybody's familiar also with stuff like South Park, one of the funniest scenes, and it's funny because they kind of tie into the same character that I'm about to reference. But if anybody, and I know plenty of our Fangs and Infernos are familiar with the movie They Live, well, the South Park guys were big They Live fans. Like they love that movie. And the cripple fight between, Jimmy and Timmy was practically shot for shot, even line for line. The Roddy Piper and David fight from They Live in the alley. And now it's been a while since I've watched Silver Bullet, and I'm rewatching this, and I'm like, wait, they got a character in a gnarly power wheelchair who goes by the name Timmy, and he actually says it that way in this movie. Oh, come on, man. There is no way that this movie didn't help influence that character. I will die on the hill for that fight. You're not convincing me otherwise. Now, that being said, you might know a little bit more than I do on that. You might be aware of whether or not that actually is a reference. But being if you don't, I'm sticking by the fact that there is no way that the Silver Bullet Timmy didn't influence the South Park Timmy.
I mean, especially just because of that souped up wheelchair that Gary Busey's character, his uncle gives him the whole time, man. It's like it's crazy too, because it's like throughout this movie, even with him going out, getting out of his house, and like, and trying to go out before the fireworks and stuff like that. He's basically escaping out of like a second story window
Yeah.
while this dude's crippled and has no use to his legs. It's like, wait, why is like I mean, granted he's going down like this little shimmy thing that he made to go down it, but it's just like the whole entire time. But like I said, kudos to them. Like I said, it was Corey Haim, we got Corey Haim in this
Yep.
movie, so it was so awesome, just to see him and stuff like that. And like I said, he's, it's, obviously, we've always loved him in all the movies that he did. But yeah, like I said, that's definitely like when you watch it, man, he's just so young in this movie. He's just it's funny. Just but like I said, just the movie, especially with the book and stuff like that too, because it's based
Yeah.
off of basically the Stephen King short story,
The cycle. Yep.
Cycle of the Werewolf, and in that movie, it's basically through in the book. I mean, it's the whole thing is through a year. So you get where you're getting the month of each month where there's a full moon. You get that where they kind of do that in this movie where yeah, whenever the werewolf kind of attacks, it's always around the full moon time, but they kind of shorten it where it's probably around May-ish or so when it starts. Obviously, they get out of school. It's in the fall, and then like you have the Fourth of July scene and stuff like that, and then you have by the end of the movie when it gets to the end movie, it's a Halloween. So it's through like 6 months of that. But I always thought it was kind of cool. Just the cool as far as the werewolf side of it. Like I said. I mean, the werewolf is like taking nothing, no punches. I mean, he's just killing motherfuckers.
Oh,
You know,
dude, that
he's
werewolf's taking names,
yeah,
Devil.
man. He's killing dudes watching WWF wrestling.
Popping pills.
He's killing kids. Flying kites and shit like that. He don't care, man. He doesn't give a shit if what they are. He's just taking them out. And I always liked that. I always liked the fact that doing that. I always liked the fact that you kind of didn't really know who the werewolf was at the time, and even though they give you little hints like with when you find out that it was the pastor or the preacher that was it, even him having these like nightmares of like the whole town turning into werewolves, you kind of think, okay, maybe it's just it's just, the paranoia of this wolf or what's
Yeah.
going on, and nobody really knows until, until Marty, until he just decides to shoot him in the eye, and then that's when his sister goes around and tries to find out who it was. And then, like I said, she's going through the whole entire time, going through the town and doing all the stuff and figuring out like who everybody's got their eyes. She's watching them, and then she's like, he's just my kid brother's just playing a prank on me. Goes to bring in the bottles and the cans and to the priest, to the church, and lo and behold, he's got the patch on his eye, and she's like, "Oh shit, it's real. The werewolf
Yeah.
is real."
No, for sure. And then you also see like the morphing actually happen and stuff, which I'll be honest, this isn't my favorite human to werewolf morph I've ever seen. Still worlds better than cursed, but but not my favorite. For a movie that came out after American Werewolf in London, it left a little bit to be desired on like that morph, but also at the same time it's different movies, different budgets, different visual, different thoughts. There might be a different, you know particular vision of like how it is. But I loved the idea of like this pastor guy being it, because the funny thing is too is like the pastor's kind of a dick like during the movie anyway. I mean, he's kind of a wanker. He's a lot like that guy from Santa's Sleigh. And so it's like it's interesting too in this, because the one thing though about werewolf movies is they tend to be you tend to be a little bit more sympathetic and empathetic towards the werewolf, because it's more this just kind of, oh, you poor cursed soul, you just poor person, like, sorry about your damn luck, that just really sucks. This dude's kind of a straight see you next Tuesday, and it's like you kind of root against him, and you're like, man, he's, like I said, he's killing people in great ways. Like he's slashing down a pregnant woman. Like there's parts of this movie that they would struggle to get, to be able to do nowadays. But like you do get a sense of that old school rooting for the hero to take out the villain, situation in this. Because, like I said, a lot of times you do have a certain amount of empathy when it comes to a werewolf character in his movies or their movies. This is not really one of those movies, man. You just kind of want him to get his just desserts.
Yeah, yeah, and it's cool too because for all the Fangs and Infernos out there, we have the guy who plays the pastor preacher is a V&D alumni, because
Yes.
people would remember him as the father from People Under the Stairs. So he just plays that perfect kind of like sleazeball asshole even in this movie. And like you said, yeah, you kind of really don't feel sorry for him. Like you said,
No.
sometimes in some, like in American Werewolf in London, you feel sorry for him, and that you feel sorry for some of these werewolf movies and stuff like that of them going out. And, yeah, you're kind of like this guy is kind of a dick to begin with, so he's just the way that he is. He's just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. And like I said, and then when he's obviously he's in werewolf form and stuff like that, you're like, okay, yeah. And then like I said, when they get him, and and then like I said, it gets into where they're making the silver bullet for him, and he's just like, I love that too when he gets into that part where Gary Busey's character is going to like this gunsmith. He's like, hey, he's just trying to make up this cockatoo story. He's like, hey, my kid, my nephew just got really into the Lone Ranger all of a sudden. And now he wants a silver bullet, and he's like, "Oh, shooting werewolves, huh?" And he's like, "No, no, it's a lone wolf." He's like, "No, no, no, you're
No.
going, no, you're going for for werewolf." So it kind of like like with it being that kind of reference of Corey Haim being in this movie in the Lost Boys, where it's like with the dad always saying, the grandpa saying, one bad thing about Santa Clara is all these damn vampires. And it's kind of like this, where it's like this old guy's like, yeah, I've probably made a bunch of silver bullets before. I kind of feel like this area is, not the first werewolf that he's basically encountered in his life of, being a gunsmith and being, a guy who makes bullets and stuff like that. But that's the cool thing about this movie too, is you
Yeah.
really you really don't really know the backstory of how the preacher pastor character became a werewolf. You just basically just it starts off with him just fucking killing people during the moon. He's like I said, he's killing lovers, and he's killing pregnant women, and he's killing basically like the what he considers like the scum and the slime of the town. She's the
Yeah.
pregnant girl is basically like not married and having a kid under wedlock, and the dad's an alcoholic that he kills, and like he's killing like so you're like he's not necessarily killing. In the beginning it seems like he's not really killing bad people, so you're kind of like okay, whatever. But then like when he starts killing the kid in the kite, and
Yeah.
starts killing people like that, you're like okay, maybe this guy isn't such a great guy though too. So you're like yeah, that's a like you said, it's one of those ones like even like as a kid, like I said, I've always been when I was a kid, I always always rooted for the bad guys had to win. This is one of those movies where it wasn't that way. I was like fuck yeah man, shoot him and kick him in the nuts. I'm like pastors don't have any nuts, and he's like and then it's like, at the towards the end, they have a kind of line that makes me laugh like that. The reason why I said kick him in the nuts is because obviously Marty's, his character, Corey's character is, in a wheelchair, so he can't use his legs, and that's even a joke they make in the very end of the movie, non spoiler, but like at the very end, he's like, "Is everybody okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, except I can't feel my legs," and they're all like, "Well, yeah, no shit. You're paralyzed. You've been paralyzed for ever, whatever."
Pastors got nards.
Yeah, pastors don't have nards.
But yeah, no, for sure. And there's some and right, leading up to that scene as well is also just some other just kind of cool action kills. I feel like one of my favorite scenes of the movie is just like when he just starts like wiping people out like in the fog. Like you just
Yeah,
watch that one dude just kind of get like just ripped back just into the abyss, like practically literally. And it's just like, whoa. And he just he's
he takes
even
the one guy's baseball bat and just starts fucking him up with the baseball bat. He's like, "Oh, you want to
just
bring a bat, motherfucker?"
yeah, like seriously, it's insane. That's like I said before, it was like this werewolf's not only just like, just taking people out, but he is taking people out and just taking names. Like it is really insane. It's like watching Rambo if
Yeah.
he was like a fucking werewolf. It's absolutely crazy, dude. But like overall, man, I enjoy this movie, man. I think it's an enjoyable experience. I'll go into just a couple of minuscule details in like 2 minutes when it's my part of the obituaries. But when it comes to how you want to rank this movie, you chose Silver Bullet, my friend. How do you look at it?
I mean, for me, like I said, I've always, well, I mean, I've always loved this movie. I rank this really high. I put this on like I said, it may not be the greatest movie overall. It might not be the greatest werewolf movie overall, even visually and stuff like that. But I've always put this as high regard as far as like top five of my favorite like werewolf movies of all time. Just because it's such a good, fun, entertaining movie that I can watch it over and over and over again. Like I said, and then the adding the love of of Stephen, it being the Stephen King book, and I was a huge Stephen King fan, reading all his books and short stories, being a huge Corey Feldman or Corey Haim fan and stuff like that. Growing up, obviously, like I said, Gary Busey, before he started getting a little touchy and crazy Gary Busey, stuff like that. So it's like I've always had a thing for this movie. Like I said, if people go, I mean, obviously, you have those ones where, excluding like the Universal monster, werewolf, and stuff like that, with Wolfman and stuff like that. I've always kind of, with the American Werewolf in London, Howling, and I put Silver Bullet in that top regard of just a really good, fun, entertaining, and just like I said, not naturally the transformation scene, which is kind of weird because his transformation scene, like you said, isn't the greatest, but the transformation scene of the church growers in his dream is sick. I love it when they're all turning into werewolves and stuff like that. I think maybe it's like that. Yeah, I mean the werewolf it sometimes looks a little doggish and stuff like that. I mean, it's not as bad as Teen Wolf 2. It's not as bad as American Werewolf in Paris. I mean, there's definitely, like we said before, with Cursed and some other ones and stuff
Yeah.
like that. It's definitely, like that. But as far as like entertainment wise, I've always loved this movie. It's, like I said, it's always been a staple in my household. Like I said, I grew up watching this film all the time. So for me, like I said, and like I said, and even when it comes to Stephen King and Stephen King that adapted movies, it's always been like one of my favorite ones that he's done. Just because I just always love the concept of it. It's a very simplicical, very easy movie. You know what I mean? It's just basically straightforward. It's a werewolf going around killing everybody. A kid goes and shoots fireworks at a werewolf. Nobody believes him. They try to kill him. They try to figure it out and stuff like that. It's a very simple story, but it's
Yeah.
got such a cool, it's wrote so well with that Stephen King flow of it and stuff like that, where it's just like, you never know exactly what's gonna happen. So like I said, to me overall, I've always loved this movie. So for me, I'm gonna give it an 8.0 just because I've always been a huge fan of this movie. And like I said, I've never heard anybody ever. I mean, I know we're gonna have some gripes and some grimes, and you're
Yeah.
you're obviously gonna do some pointers that. But I've never heard of anybody ever saying, as far as when it comes to Stephen King movies, some people are back and forth with certain movies. Like, oh yeah, there's some that everybody agrees are the better ones, but I never really heard anybody ever not say they didn't like Silver Bullet. I've never heard anybody that said they hated Silver Bullet. There have been people who might not agree with it being as high as I am, or
Right.
maybe being top five werewolf movies of all time. But I've never heard anybody ever go like Silver Bullet. Ah, that was a shitty ass Stephen King movie.
No, absolutely, Devil. And this will be no different. You won't be hearing that here either, because I truly don't feel that way. The only thing that really like kind of was annoying to me, and this is just more of like a personal thing, is like I really kind of hate the score of this movie. It's got this really bizarre way of playing like what you feel should be like happy feel good music at the same time as people getting like just completely fucked up, like it's like watching it's like watching it's like watching Hellraiser to the score of The Princess Bride. It's
Yeah,
just very strange, and it's a very weird concept, and it fucks a little bit with my moment, like but like
yeah.
being in the moment and stuff
It's
like that.
very stringy, like
Yeah,
orchestra-ish, and it's very like dramatic, almost like soap opera-ish.
yeah. But at kind of the inopportune times, like
Yeah,
used to horror movies that have a little bit of that, operatic or classical kind of feel, but it's usually very similar to like that classic scene that they reference all throughout pop culture of the Hulk, like the walking down the street Hulk music.
yeah,
It's like it's used to like that kind of a scene, or you're finally in the clear, or you finally have your moment. Like it's just used very strangely throughout this movie, and I just don't really I don't get it. And it, like I said, it has its little ways of like taking me out of the moment. Overall, I do like the movie though quite a bit. I don't give it quite as much love as you do, but again, it's different strokes for different folks. But I do give it a solid 7.0 personally, because of the fact that like again, dude, like this is also one of those werewolf movies where yeah, you see werewolf movies of werewolves fucking up, the common populace, but like from just like the beheadings to the claws tear ups to just beating the fuck out of somebody with a bat. Like you don't have that kind of like savagery to this one. And that was the thing that's so crazy about this movie is there's a human factor. And I know Fangs and Infernos, hold on, I'm not done yet. Of course there's a human factor. No, there's literally a human factor to this. The majority of werewolf movies though, you still become a werewolf. Keywords being wolf. Like you're still more animal than you are human. This, like I said, has that like Rambo feel to it, where this is more like a hairy, fang infested dude just crippling people. And so that's one of the reasons I was like, I don't want to take too much away from the movie because one, I don't feel it's warranted for that, and just the amount of fuck you is just so epic in this movie. So I give it a solid 7.0 for myself personally because I do enjoy it, solidly, and I feel a meet in the middle of 7.5 is pretty solid, is pretty good for this movie.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Especially like I say, I mean, it's definitely like I said, it definitely has its moments and things like that. And like I said, some people may not enjoy it as much as others, but like I said, it's one of those movies that yeah, I mean, you can put it on and watch it and enjoy it. And like I said, like I said, I mean, yeah, what werewolf movie do you like? You said usually, like I said, werewolves are tend to be more wolf where this werewolf is like doing, like you said, it's fucking it literally has a baseball bat in his hand and he's beating somebody with it like a person would
Yeah.
but in werewolf costume.
Yeah, just like, with a wolf paw, like just
Yeah,
fucking like, where's my money?
yeah,
Where's my money, dude?
I mean
It's
to the
that,
point where it's like Teen Wolf but not as comical and not as that, but it's still that same kind of like where it's a
yeah,
wolf person, not a wolf.
that slapstick. Like, yeah, it's definitely got that slapstick, just werewolf, but yeah, that Stewie beating Brian feel to it for any of our Fangs and Infernos that are Family Guy fans. But yeah, man, 7.5 I think is really solid for this movie. So Fangs and Infernos, that's the way it's going to be to start it off. Starting off strong, Stephen King's Silver Bullet, 7.5. Let's see if Uncle Sam can pick up the slack and get up there. It's a strong movie. I've always felt this way. Look, I'll kick right into it. It's not an award winning movie, never has been, never will be, but I do watch this movie every year somewhere. Sometimes I do watch it on the 4th of July, like I'll watch it in there, because for obvious reasons, like you would watch a Christmas movie or you would watch something else. But I always, no matter what, do tend to pop in Uncle Sam somewhere throughout the year. I just enjoy it. Just the idea of this military veteran kind of wronged by the system, killed by friendly fire, who just in similar fashion, not quite as brutalistic or whatever. Not quite the same amount of brutality, but just that same type of like, you know, fuck you, and a lot of that like, taking names kind of thing, because you do have that military killing aspect already ingrained in this guy, as he's just coming back completely warped, but taking over an Uncle Sam, costume to kind of be incognito, which is always a somewhat, it's a constantly almost kind of overused, overplayed concept of slasher movies. But at the same time, Devil, I'll say there's still a consistent place for it. That how can you go about doing your business and doing your carnage and not get busted right away? Where again, you've got Michael Myers who looks like Michael Myers, but you can't see who he is. So if he felt that he needed to show his real face to avoid suspicion, it's doable with that. Or you could take a more recent movie like Hellfest that I really like, where this guy is stalking this group of friends and killing them all off one by one, but he's dressed exactly as the other, scare actors of the event and stuff. But because this is very much happening on, 4th of July weekend, like seeing people dressed as Uncle Sam's, decorations, people just in red, white, and blue, penguin jackets and stuff, is that's commonplace. So it's part of that building up to where they have to find the right guy because it could be anyone.
Nope, you froze for a second.
Oh,
No, we're good now, we're back in there. It was just for a second, it's like splurk.
oh,
But anyway, yeah, I mean, like I said, yeah, I mean, when it comes to Uncle Sam, this is probably, honestly, probably my like second time watching this movie. To me, I'm gonna brutally attack the shit out of this movie. It's
go.
almost to the same state of like how much I know you love Santa's sleigh. This movie is to the extent I like over the top stupid movies when it comes to stuff and that comedy slapstick. But and like I said, the storyline is I like the storyline. It's a soldier that the government got killed by friendly fire, and they're like, well, how is it? It's not friendly. Fire is never friendly all that kind of stuff like that. But I mean, there's just little parts of the story that I do enjoy. I like the concept of the story of this soldier and this kid that that they dad. But then it's like to one point it doesn't make any sense either, because even like this kid is obsessed with his uncle, this Uncle Sam, who went out to the war. And he obviously he sent them stuff and he has things that he had and had that letter. But even like the mom, but then you have all that where he knows about his uncle and all like that. But then you have like the sister who was like, how do you even remember your uncle? Like you were really young. So there's kind of contradicting of like whether or not he was been around that kid enough times that why would he be impressionable but like that? So it's like that. And then you have this, it's the whole entire time I was watching this movie, and it might be me and it just might be bad casting, I guess, but the sister and the wife look way too similar, and I kept
Yeah.
on mistaking each one of them for each one the whole entire time. I'm like, wait, he's like, blah, 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 wait, I thought that was the sister. No, that's his wife. And then it was like later on, I'm like, oh, that's the wife. No, that's the sister this time. It like the whole entire time I kept confusing which one was the wife and the sister half the time. I'm like, okay, this is driving me crazy the whole entire time. But like I said, I mean, I like that. I like the comedy when when he does the stuff like that and he does the shooting, and like I said, I like the the brutality of it and stuff like that. I mean, it definitely has the cheese ballish like that. Like I said, at the end, where towards the end where they're shooting the cannonball and the cannonballs like apparently igniting a house on fire, and it's like cannonballs just shoot cannonballs. There's no real, I mean, there other than from the gunpowder to begin with, there's not much fire when it comes to cannonball. Cannonballs are meant to just destroy the fuck out of shit.
Yeah, it's
It's
just a
not
matter
meant
of
it's
what it's
not to
just a matter of
burn
what they
shit.
hit.
Yeah,
If they
exactly.
hit
But
something with gasoline or whatever, that's a
and then
different.
like I said, we reference in Silver Bullet, you reference a little bit of South Park. You have a little bit of Isaac Hayes in this movie, so
Yep.
that was cool. But I think like they kind of just his character was just very underused. It was just
Yes.
like, hey, we have Isaac Hayes in this movie. Okay, cool. And it's just like, okay, yeah, his character is like, I'm gonna talk about war. It's like this is so weird. Like I said, and like like I said, you have that, where the cat. I mean, and then like I said, they bring him back. The casket is in the house. Like, why is the casket in? Why is the casket and the body in the house the whole entire time? Like, especially as a military person, like I get the fact that they said that he wasn't gonna be buried in the military because he already had a plot with his by his mother and father, which that happens. I know the military usually does give you a plot, but you don't necessarily have to if you have a family plot. They will put you. So like I get that, and I get the fact that they're gonna have this wake and stuff like that. But it's just like it's just so weird to like have this, and then like the little kids trying to play it, and like I'm not trying to play it, and it's like yeah, it was just a lot of weird shit in this movie where it was just like when like at first, I mean, I guess if I've watched it enough times, and I probably have seen this movie as much as like you say you watch it every year and you get to it, it would probably become a little bit more where I can get past all this
Yeah.
like crazy stuff, especially
Oh,
because I
it's riddled with continuity
yeah,
errors.
yeah, and plus the fact of me being a military brat, so it's like a lot of shit that's like so weird, and it's like okay, that's like that, and then you have the military guy that's like, haha, I'm here, and yeah, the wife's looking, the ex wife is looking good. Ooh, I'm gonna get me some Gucci Gucci. And it's just like where the fuck there's a lot of weird things, but like you said, it's a lot of continuity.
He's on the stilts peering in through the window while the
Yeah,
girl's
yeah,
getting
yeah.
changed.
The Uncle Sam that's on that. I mean, that part was funny, but yeah, like I said, like what person, even if you're in a house that is second story, who doesn't have blinds in their house to begin with?
No
Because
kidding.
even if you don't have to be someone who's 7 foot tall on stilts to watch it, you could literally just be across the street with binoculars and watch this girl getting naked the whole entire time too. So it's like, I mean, that part I definitely with me giving the sin the skin and stuff like that. I mean, I'll definitely give that, give it some pointers. But yeah, it's just like I said, it being a movie that I remember watching, but I think I only watched one time. It was just really confusing. I was just like confused on, like I said, especially with the daughter sisters, and then it's like, yeah, and then he's laying down, and then eventually a letter, the his box that he had the things and medals now opens up the kid and he can come alive on the 4th of July. It's a lot of it's riddled with a lot of like what the fuck going on. But like once it gets into the action and he
Mhm.
starts fucking killing people and starts doing shit, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love that part. I love the him just fucking going gung ho, burnt face all jacked up, and then him wearing the, like you said, wearing the Uncle Sam costume and stuff like that. Adding into that of marketing for these slasher films, like you said, when Michael Myers and Jason's and stuff like that, they're like, hey, let's just put this guy in an Uncle Sam costume, and maybe that will be the hot costume of the year. I don't think it was, but they were trying.
Yeah. No, they definitely were, man. I mean, but yeah, and also shout out to horror veteran PJ Souls. I mean, you got
Yeah.
to
I
give a
mean, you
little
gotta
love
love
to
PJs, though, especially like I said, love Halloween.
that.
I don't know, but she loves those masked killers coming after
She
her.
does, man. She absolutely does. If it's not Michael Myers or Uncle Sam, it's somebody who's covered in blood like Carrie. It's like
Yep.
just got to be involved with these killers with things on their faces, man, for sure. But no, absolutely, Devil. You're not wrong about any of those points. It's a standard movie. I mean, again, when you get into the action, when you get into the kills, they're solid, they're good. There's so much bizarre. There's so much bizarre build up to this. Like I said, I've always just been an enjoyable fan of this movie. It's a good time for me. Like I said, I watch it every year somewhere. Doesn't always fall on the 4th of July. It wasn't really that long ago, not counting watching it for Showdown, that I watched it. I probably watched it with Mrs. Vamp like, I don't know, probably about like 6 months ago or something like that. So, because for that movie also always kind of falls into the category of like, you know, when it strikes me when I come across it, like last night, for example, I was binge watching the subspecies movies because I just love them always. Everybody knows how fond I am of Full Moon and how much I love subspecies. No vampire pun intended. Like it's my kinsman, yeah, but I genuinely like those movies. They're fun for me, and I watch them on the regular. But anyway, yeah, it's that same just kind of concept. It's got a good basis for the story. Like the start of the movie is pretty solid. Like the reason for why he's pissed, it does make sense. But then it's like the positioning of the coffins or the caskets, like how he's coming back to life, the reason for why he's dead in the first place. How much does the family really know about him? Stuff like that. There's just a lot of stuff left. You kind of are left wanting, and a little bit too many, like, loopholes or ends that aren't tied up and stuff like that. So you're definitely right on a lot of that. But overall, I think it's an enjoyable movie. There's plenty of stuff to hit on it for, but there's plenty of stuff to be like enjoyed as well. When it comes to the obituaries for this one, overall the real kind of concept of this movie is probably about, as well as execution, is probably about a 6.5. It's a fun movie in my opinion. It's enjoyable. I do think the more that anybody watches this movie, and I'm not saying make it something you have to watch such on the regular that you just go nuts over it, but if it is a movie that falls into anybody's just casual rotation in a chunk of time, I do think it becomes a fun, flirty, enjoyable experience. That's pretty much what happened to me. I got into it as a very, very young vampire because I found it in, Blockbuster Video when I was looking for movies to watch. And the back of the movie had the scene of the Uncle Sam peering in through the window at like the naked girl. So I was like, oh, I'm renting that. I want to see what
Yeah.
that scene's all about. That's how I found out about the movie originally, was because I was maturing and took a photo off the cover at face value, and went from there. But overall it's a 6.5 as probably a movie. I do personally bump it a half a point to a 7 for just overall enjoyment, mixed with just kind of the fun of the criteria. So I personally like it as a 7, while acknowledging that the movie to the common populace is probably a 6.5, but seven's what I'm going to give it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I definitely agree with that. And like I said, I mean, I'm all for dumb movies, and I love people who enjoy movies that other people are like, this is fucking stupid. Like I'm currently rewatching Sinbad of the Seven Seas with Lou
Ha,
Ferrigno.
ha.
I love that fucking movie. It's the dumbest thing in the entire world. It's so horrible, but it puts it in that aspect of like those kind of movies, like movie with that, like Eric the Viking, Ice Pirates, horrible movies, but I frequently watch them all the time because I just find an enjoyment of how like overly stupid it is, like and how bad acting and how like horrible everything is in it, which is just crazy. So like I said, I get I get the appeal of the Uncle Sam film, and like I said, I'm not saying that it was a horrible movie.
Oh
Like it
yeah.
wasn't. It just wasn't. Like I said, it was kind of like I was just. It was more confusing at some points to me than I like other stuff. Like I said, maybe if like I said, if I've watched it a couple times, then I would know. Okay, this girl is the wife, looks like this all the time, so I can know which one's which. It was like I said, I was confusing on which one was the wife and the daughter and the sister the whole entire time. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, why is she yelling at her kid? Why is this one telling it? Why is this one coming home early? I'm like, what the hell is going on? But like I said, overall, like I said, it's not a bad movie. It's definitely something like I said, I would I would encourage the Fangs and Infernos to watch if you're even to the point where you're tired of watching Jaws or even Silver Bullet will throw that because it's in there. If you're
Yeah.
tired of just watching typical Fourth of July movies, I know what you did last summer, or ones
Right.
that typically are those. If you get you want to find something new for Fourth of July, definitely. I mean, I definitely encourage people to go see it. Like I said, I mean, and then form your own opinion, whether or not you like it or not. Like I said, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, that's the cool thing about the horror community is like we can at least, we may not agree with the movies as ones are good and ones are bad, but you can at least go and say, oh, okay, I see your points, and okay, this is kind of cool and stuff like that. And at least he didn't sparkle like the Twilight people, but
Facts.
and like I said, there definitely could be worse things. Like I said, I mean, we got to see a pair of titties. Like I mean, so I mean, who doesn't like seeing nudity? So I mean, you add that into it. I like seeing shit getting blown up and fucked up, and and I think it was a cool movie. But like I said, it was just a lot of weird points. Like this guy's a military guy. I know he's supposed to go out. And, military guys are meant to kill, but like they're only killing because that's what the situation's calling for because it's a kill or be killed out in on warfare, where this guy was kind of like you get the backstory about him being like kind of a serial killer or have that mentality of a serial killer already. So he
Yeah, because
was he
he
was
wasn't
trying
really
to
killing,
yeah, he was in a killing person to begin with before he military, so they was
but he
talking
wasn't
about.
also really killing for revenge either. It's
Yeah,
not like he did. It's not like Spawn, for example, where that's
yeah,
a military guy who got fucked by the system and he went back after the system. This
yeah,
is a guy who
exactly.
got fucked by the system and then just started offing random fools.
Yeah, just random people. So it's like I get if he was going after like the military captain and things like that. I can understand that. I can understand if he went to the White House and started shooting people, or went somewhere else into a military base and started killing a bunch of people. But yeah, it's just like very random. I'm just gonna randomly kill all these people because they're celebrating the Fourth of July and they're celebrating America, and I fought for America and died for America, and these people don't like me, so I'm just gonna kill all Americans because they like America. And it's
Right.
kind of like, oh, it's like okay, well, whatever, man. But but like I said, overall, like I said, I definitely, like I said, where you were at a 6.5 and stuff like that. I think that's pretty good. I mean, I would go. I mean, like I said, I think in general, me personally, I probably would give it more of a 6.0, but I'll give it that extra points, just give it that point 0.5 extra because of the boobies and the skin, the fact that it does criteria beats my movie as far as the a Fourth of July movie. It is the Fourth of July.
Yeah.
It is the Fourth of July weekend throughout this movie, so it's a very it is, and it's very like I said, very patriotic. Very red, white, and blue. hoo-ha kind of film. So like I said, yeah, in general, yeah, I think I would give it a 6.5.
No worries, brother. It's all good. So I'm a pitch this at you just for fun and fodder. You know, we don't do the middle grounds and stuff like that when it comes to that kind of stuff. The bottom line is whether it's a 6.5 or a 7, today Fangs and Infernos is still going to be victory for the devil, as Silver Bullet will be taking this one. But for the sake of sticking to the criteria, I'm going to suggest that we bump it that point 0.5 to my 7, just for the sake that this was a 4th of July movie and a 4th of July showdown, which isn't going to change the outcome of this. But what do you say about that, Devil? A 7.5 for Silver Bullet to a 7 simply for 4th of July nostalgia for Uncle Sam. And if you're really not feeling it, if it's not something you can do, we can do a 6.5 because, like I said, that is where I do feel the movie belongs.
Yeah, I'm all for bumping it up to a 7.0, but I think the you're gonna have to sell me a little bit more for that point 0.5 because I did go from 6 to a 6.5
Fair.
because it was a more of a 4th of July movie. So if you really, really want that 7.0, you're gonna have to give me there's gotta be something other than the fact that there was boobs and it's more of a 4th of July movie than
That's
Silver
all that
Bullet.
should have mattered for you,
But
Devil,
but
is sin
but
and skin,
but
baby.
but that's what jumped it from a 6 to a 6.5. So I already
No,
jumped
you're
it up.
good.
So you gotta give me something else to bump it up another half point. I
No,
gotta get
you're
something. There's gotta be something. You gotta tell me like Isaac Hayes, wants you to suck on his salty chocolate balls or something.
Isaac Hayes does want us to suck on his chocolate salty balls. Nah, man, fair enough, Devil. It's all good, dude. No worries. Because the fact of the matter is, you wanted to give it as you felt it was a 6. You bumped it to 6.5. I felt it was a 6.5. I bumped it to 7. So in reality, it's 6 and 6.5, which means that I would have asked you still to bump it for the sake of sticking to the criteria and it being a 4th of July movie. So Fangs and Infernos, that's the way it's gonna be. By the way, fuck you, devil. Is but that's the way that it is gonna be. Like I said, regardless, it is victory for the devil on the 4th of July episode, as with a 7.5 for Silver Bullet to a 6.5 for Uncle Sam. Devil takes it home and chucks the movie. Uncle Sam, pew, into the inferno. That's the way it's going to be on this obituaries. 7.5 to 6.5 for Silver Bullet, Stephen King. As always, we really appreciate all of our partners and sponsors of the Vampire and Devil podcast. You like to get brutal? You like a nice hot cup of tea? Then please, all about the brutalities. Some like it hot, just like my beloved Devil here. You like a little bit of spice on your food? Devil sometimes does, sometimes he doesn't. But you like a little bit of that ting in your mouth? Coney Island Saucery, that's where you want to be. You like creepy decor and homemade Ouija boards? Go see our friends at Twisted Vines. And of course, our very, very beloved, great friends at Buffalo Bill's house. And your beloved vampire recently was up in Salem, Massachusetts at the Salem Vampire Salon with Mrs. Vamp. So, of course, next time you're up there, go and check out the Salem Witchboard Museum, or in Baltimore, check out the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. But as always, also make sure that you're dressing up nice on behalf of Devil and Vampire, or Vampire and Devil, depending on which one of us you like better, with our friends at Rock and Horror Apparel, rockandhorror.com. ROCK as in rock, the letter N, and horror. That is the only place that you can get Vampire and Devil merch. We really appreciate Mark and Lizzie for taking that task on and doing an amazing job. So we appreciate you guys, but that's where it's going to be. That's where it will lie, and we will see you again soon. Horns up. Bangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them. You go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
All right, Fangs and Infernos, let's talk about a brand new coffin nail, shall we? Let's talk a little bit about Beverly Hills Vampire from 1989. Now, this one's actually incredibly interesting. So on like places like IMDb, it's ranked at like basically like a 4.0 as far as like the ranking goes for enjoyment. I'm going to go a little bit higher than this one. Here's the bottom line when it comes to this. It's incredibly ridiculous. But Eddie Deason is in this movie. And if you know who he is, he played Eugene in Grease. And I just think he's awesome. He was super duper fun in this movie. This is basically like a vamped out version of like Revenge of the Nerds, if it was also kind of mixed with like Once Bitten with Jim Carrey. Basically, these three nerds, they want to do a movie, and they end up staying at like a brothel, and the girls they end up hiring, to kind of, feed their pleasures while they're trying to figure all this out, are vampires. It really also has a lot of that feeling of like Transylvania 65000. It's a really, really goofy movie. It's so ridiculous. The acting is here and there. It's kind of suspect and stuff. But look, overall, this is a fun movie. And when it got started, I was like, this is going to be ridiculous, and I'm about to bash this movie. Then Eddie showed up, and I'm kind of like, oh my God, he's in this movie? Let me pay a little bit closer attention. And overall, like I said, it's a fun, enjoyable movie. It's got that, like I said, Revenge of the Nerds, Transylvania 5000, Once Bitten, all kind of rolled up into one. The special effects are campy, but they work. And overall, it's fun. It's an enjoyable time. You've got deaths by stakes, crucifixes, and holy water. What else could a vampire, want to stay away from? Because you know how I am with vampiric lore. But even though it's campy and bizarre as fuck, it does at least stick true to the traditional ways to kill a vampire and didn't totally butcher them, and it does kind of work. So I'm going to give this a 5.5 on my personal obituaries when it comes to how I look at this movie. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos. 5.5 for Beverly Hills Vamp from 1989. Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards. Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really, really, really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards. He knows his history. He's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore. So all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out. You know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum and you got to check it out because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.